Jennifer Schaffner, OCLC Research, and I'm here with my colleague Dennis Massey, who has just published a brand new report on sharing special collections. The title of the report is Tears for Fears, Sensible, Streamlined Sharing of Special Collections. So Dennis, let's start out. What sparked this work?
Well, this report has been years in the making. A lot of people worked on it. There was maybe the best working group I've ever been involved with. It was teams of special collections people and interlibrary loan people working together to confront what has, in the field, continued to be a pretty controversial issue, lending physical items from special collections. There's a lot of professional disagreement about this. So this group got together, and what I'm excited about is that they've actually come up with a handful of tools and some really good advice that I think people in the field will actually be able to use to be able to kind of reconsider their policies and procedures about this kind of thing.
So, Tears for Fears. Dennis, can you explain the title?
Well, you don't often see the word fear in a report, and in this case it's separated by a mere colon from the word sensible. So the reason for that is if let's say you're a special collections curator and you're considering taking one of your treasured items and putting it on a truck and sending it to a distant library for another researcher to use, you're going to have some pretty valid concerns about the safety of that material, when it's going to come back, whether it will come back in the same condition in which you let it out. So the steering committee that thought of this project, everybody who worked on it, everybody on the working group, each person had to kind of confront their own anxieties about this topic, because it's momentous if some of this stuff can't be replaced if you're going to let it out. So they managed to get the work done because they came up with a set of first principles that kind of took the scare out of lending things that are scarce. And there were 4 of them. The first one is, in most cases, if someone asks you to lend something for special collections, the answer is still going to usually be no. I mean, most often you'll want to try to provide a surrogate, digital surrogate or a copy of a part of it. So yes, most of the time it's not appropriate. The second one would be, not everything in special collections is equally special. I mean, you've got your Gutenberg Bible, but you may also have a whole collection of mystery novels or something that's widely held elsewhere. So there are some things you may want to consider possibly lending out. The third thing would be, not all requests are considered or are created equal. Some folks may be just asking for something to satisfy some curiosity, but another researcher, their entire project may be at stake and they really need to get their hands on that. The fourth thing is, folks need to trust their ILO folks. ILO practitioners, they invented that whole thing about sending out a surrogate instead of the original. They've been working for years to perfect their infrastructure and all the techniques for handling material. With a little coaching, they can learn to handle even the most sensitive and precious stuff. And they'll know, they have good judgment, they'll know when to consult with special collections colleagues. So once folks had those in place, they felt a lot calmer about it, and they proceeded to create a bunch of tools.
So do you want to talk about the tiers in the Tears for Fears?
Exactly, right. Probably the most important thing that came out of this is a tiered approach that we actually stole from one of your papers, Jen, the Scan and Deliver work you did about doing scan-on-demand services for folks in special collections. 3 different tracks, each one representing a different level of overhead and effort and staff resource. So in the old days, whenever anyone, if a library even considered lending something from special collections, each request that came in was treated as a special project, and it was just lavished with all this attention. A lot of people had to consult about it. Every step in the process was handled by a specially trained expert. So as special collections get more discoverable, more requests for this stuff are coming in, and that just won't scale. So for certain kinds of things, you may be able to push it over toward the left, where there's a collaborative, I don't remember what the name of them are, routine, cooperative, and exceptional workflows. So there may be a few categories of material at your shop where the ILO person can make a decision all by themselves and say, I know this stuff's okay, I can look at it and lend it out without even asking special collections. There may be some other things that a moderate amount of consulting needs to go on, and that would fall into the middle tier. And then there are some things where if you're going to consider lending it at all, it really needs that lavish amount of attention to make sure it gets out and back safely. So it's going to be different for each place. Each shop may want to spend some time having the ILO and special collections people talk through this stuff and decide, are there classes of material here that fit into each of these and which. You can also mix and match. You're not locked into any one particular track. It really is one, you can adapt it to fit any situation.
So Dennis, tell me how you imagine that people who are out in the field in special collections and interlibrary loan are going to use the report.
Well, what we'd like to see, and in fact what we've seen already from folks who are part of the working group, many of them were just in the beginning stages of considering doing this. They used the grid, the tiered approach here, to actually sit down and have all these kind of discussions between IL and special collections staff that they'd never had before. They really used it as a roadmap to walk through the issues that need to be confronted if you're going to develop policies and procedures to do this. So we really hope it starts discussion out there. It gets the ILL and special collections folks thinking and working together in new ways.
You talked about tools. Tell me about the tools that your group and you put together in this report.
Right. Aside from the grid, which is the centerpiece, we developed a couple of other tools as well. One of them was, we did a survey. And I think 25 of the respondents said that they had developed a written policy for sharing special collections. When we actually asked to see those, it turned out that they were really on one really specific aspect of it, like how to do it for microform or whatever. So there really wasn't one that came in, so we ended up kind of stealing the language from all these little pieces and stitching them together into this overall arching document that it's really kind of like a Chinese menu sort of thing where you can, it's a template. You take 2 of these and 3 of those and you leave out what you don't need. And it should be really pretty easy to start from there and adapt our model policy to fit your institution. And then there's some really important reasons to have a model policy too. I mean, it documents what you're doing. It gets everybody on the same page. It puts you out there to the world. If you put it on your website, you have some hope maybe of inspiring some reciprocity then. If you have some turnover in your senior management, it kind of lists what you've been doing before. So a lot of times if a person leaves, they end up having to start over from scratch. So it's just really good to document what you've been doing. It's a conversation starter for what you'll do in the future. So that's one of them. Another is called the Shares Facilities Trust Checklist. And this came out of some discussions where we noticed in the old days when folks used to treat each request as a special project, almost every time they'd get a request to borrow something from their special collections, the curators would invariably want to speak to the patron or the special collections people at the borrowing institution. And so they would call them up and ask them all these questions about their facilities, about the expertise on staff, the climate control in the room, and so forth, security measures. And we boiled those down to a set of core questions. We've got 12 of them. So it can be used in a number of different ways. For a lender, if they don't know the borrowing institution, to point them toward it and say, here's what we expect of a facility that's going to host one of our special items. Do you meet this? A borrowing institution can use it to say, I want to borrow some things from you, and by the way, we meet all of these criteria. Here's the list. A borrowing institution could also use it to go to their own administration. If they might say, we need to borrow this kind of material for our researchers, but we need to upgrade our facilities because we don't meet the requirements of the lenders. So it can be used in a number of different ways.
I like the way that came out. It's boiled down. It's really simple and solid. My institution employs staff that are trained in handling special collections. Check.
Yeah.
My institution maintains a supervised and secure reading room. Check. Very cool.
We started out with 22, and it took a while to get them down. Like you have a covered loading dock. So we really got down to the heart of it.
So, any final thoughts as you're sending this out into the world?
Just that I hope it inspires a lot of conversations. The last thing in the report is a case study. It's folks from Penn State who joined the working group just because they were at the beginning stages of considering doing this, and it really kind of chronicles step by step how they worked through their fears and their concerns and how they really kind of reorganized their entire operation. Now they're lending out manuscripts. They were very brave, and they really walk the walk, and they don't just talk the talk. So I'm hoping that happens in other places where this ends up being kind of a catalyst for folks to come together and work through this and think about it in a new way. Hope it does some good.
This is great, Dennis. Thanks a lot, and thanks for all your work.
Thank you, Jen.